Dear hosts and dear organizers of the event, dear brothers and sisters at coffee, good morning. Building on Giuseppe's introduction to coffee and climate, I would like to dive a bit deeper together with you in the work that the initiative is doing on the ground, on the spot, and we'll show you some experiences that I think also building on the example that Her Excellency, the Vice Minister of Agriculture in Costa Rica was giving us, can really help to get our leaders in the coffee sector a bit more of sleep in the future. Definitely, the problems that we do face in our sector, they are very complex if we talk about climate change. We have storms and very erratic weather events like rains, like droughts, that gain ground in so many places today. We also have midterm events like oscillations, como El Niño, and ultimately we know for sure that temperature is going to increase over the next 100 years. We have no idea which magnitude this temperature increase might gain at this point in time. Next to weather, and this was mentioned already, we also have another environmental factor for the producer, which is the economic environment, and here yet again to mention the price volatility, which definitely tends to increase in terms of climate change. So looking into the farmers and looking into our production base in the coffee sector, which is dominated by smallholder farmers, we know for sure that farmers need help. In many places, they do struggle with their livelihood concepts, in particular if prices are low. Extension services and advice systems do limit still their access to information, to technology, and definitely also to support that they're required in order to behave like entrepreneurs. Their situation is definitely not yet sustainable in many, many places. And yet climate change takes us to the next level of complexity. We can tell them not really what to do, so it's very difficult for us to reach in any given place with the clear recipe of how to address these new challenges. We can't tell them, will it rain in the right time? Will it be dry or not? Or will pests spread more strongly? The impact of climate change is very much a location-specific effect. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution to it. So the best we can do is develop really a methodology based on a risk assessment that can guide decision-taking for us as supporters for the producers, but definitely also for the producers themselves. It's all about risk avoidance, risk reduction, and risk transfer. Coffee and Climate is an initiative that starts to build that knowledge and that experience. It's an initiative that has the vision of enabling farmers to very much effectively reply to the changing conditions in climate terms. Our mission, and Giuseppe was mentioning, is to combine state-of-the-art climate research with farming methods, be practical and hands-on, and develop applicable tools for the producers, form a network in the places where we operate, but definitely also in our sector, and at the same time be pre-competitive in all what we do. We are working with 3,000 farmers, yes, in phase 1 in 4 pilot regions, which is Trifino, the Central American Triangle of Guatemala, Salvador, and Honduras, which is Brazil in Minas Gerais, which is Tanzania, and which is Vietnam. We picked those countries definitely for their importance as representative regions for the universe in our coffee sector. So we have different production systems, different coffees being produced, and definitely different challenges, climatic challenges in all these different regions. Through the work of phase 1, we have managed to refine and shape an approach that we found out working in the field. The approach is characterized by 2 basically domains. One is the assessment or the problem domain, and the other one is the solution domain. We start with setting the scene, look into information about the situation in a given region, like, for instance, these climate models that are being produced in quite a huge number today, and give us a bit of insight into long-term trends in coffee-producing regions, and try to assess to which extent they might lead to some reduction in the suitability of coffee areas, or even increase in the suitability as another trend that definitely can be supported by climate change. The second is the assessment of the climate challenges in a specific region and the risks that are associated with it from the producer perspective. In the absence of clear information and clear measured evidence, we need to use proxies to approach a certain element of risk. And here we have developed a triangulation method combining the information that we collect from the producers, from the researchers, and from the extension agents that interact in a given region, which gives us quite a good perspective of the real risk if these three sources coincide in their observations and in their assessment. And that also leads us to identify adaptation options that might be appropriate in a given region. These adaptation options we then take to the field. We plan an intervention. We plan an intervention that can be a combination, depending on the adaptation options identified, of straight into implementation of adaptation options, while others would require a validation to be better tested if they work in a given environment. Last not least, which forms an important element of this approach, is the continuous assessment of experiences and information as they are being generated. We defined this approach in a circle because we know that climate change is going to continue to change. It's not a static phenomenon. It's going to yield new situations for the producers, so we should do all the best actually to continuously upgrade and further develop our approaches. So what have we found out? We started to collect data in a very systematic way at farmer level. And we work very much at farmer level, even by involving research. We go outside the research institutions and take all the experiences to the field. We found out that definitely good agricultural practices are a very good start. If they are being implemented in a very consistent way, and if producers are being supported through support services to implement them properly. But we also need to further develop certain approaches. New elements can be incorporated, some of which definitely, as mentioned, are straightforward, no regret measures, while others require really a bit of field testing. So we did validation trials in many locations. As you saw, 4 different pilot regions. In all of them, we had certain testing of new tools, new adaptation options ongoing in the field. This is a case study from Honduras. Interesting here is that we measured soil temperature. Soil temperature in 15 centimeters of deep. And we see it also rising significantly with the sun exposure. And definitely an important indicator that this can become problematic if we know that temperatures are going to rise in the future around the globe. So soil cover, as you can see here, and shade, they drastically reduced the soil temperature and helped the plant in 2 ways. To reduce evapotranspiration, to keep better moisture in the soil for enabling the growing conditions, but also to cause less stress in growth. And this is interesting because coffee reacts quite sensitively to temperature. Extended periods of temperatures above 33, 35 centigrades, they can cause the plants to reduce their productivity. As you can see here in the next slide, which just summarizes our trial, it's a photo taken by a drone, which we used in Honduras, and also to assess certain production patterns from a different angle. We see here 3 different replications of this adaptation trial. So we had the control group business as usual. We had number B, soil cover with brachiaria, and we had or plot C, with also incorporating temporary shade with pigeon pea. And you see that really quite clearly the plant height changed, and also the cherries per tree had a different result if the plant was just better protected and could better combat with temperature. We all know that 32 centigrades are critical for the period of flowering. If they're an extended period of time, the plants get that exposure. Very likely is that they abort the flowers and the harvest is being lost. So within our approach, we try to do everything, depending on the locations, to cool down production systems to 30 centigrades maximum for an extended period of time. Farmers' response, for us the most important proof of concept. I'm glancing through all the different locations briefly to see how farmers actually have reacted. Adoption rates have been quite nicely increasing for a number of adaptation options, as you can see. No doubt in Central America and Trifino, the rust crisis definitely has given us a push. So rust management practices like shading, pruning, but also the application of lime sulfur have gained ground quite fast. Also pH adaptation has been, or regulation has been quite successful, knowing that an optimum pH level definitely increases the efficiency of many agricultural inputs that you wish to apply. We also see that producers have applied on many plots more than one application tool. So they really identified various tools for them to support upgrading their production systems. And almost 94% have applied more than one adaptation, no more than two adaptation options, which definitely contributes to the resilience of their production system. Similar experiences we have in Vietnam. Definitely the adaptation options look different in that place. A lot has to do with water. We know the production system in Vietnam heavily depends on irrigation. So no surprise that farmers actually are very much interested in technologies and approaches for reducing the irrigation water they use. Also diversification and intercropping gain ground. And obviously also Vietnam, depending significantly on external inputs, the balanced fertilization was a very attractive application option for the Vietnamese farmers. Surprising composting, an additional element actually for enriching soil organic matter, also was quite good in the adaptation rates in Vietnam. Also they are similar to the Trifino case. Farmers over time incorporate more and more of the application options as the news spread. A similar snapshot from Tanzania. You might wonder yourself about the first adaptation option, collecting climate data that is conducted by almost everybody. It's sheer the fact that we use a group approach for collecting data, and farmers, just by showing a huge interest in learning more about the parameters that define climate and weather conditions, are definitely appreciating such kind of opportunity. I would not go through them in detail. I think it's self-explaining. Let's have a closer look into Brazil. Also here we have a number of adaptation options that were identified. We have cover crops, also the data collection, containment basins for water, rainwater harvesting systems, application of gypsum to trigger root growth to further deeper soil layers, shade, an interesting element in the Brazilian coffee sector, knowing that everybody believes so much in sun-grown coffee, but it's probably to become a very serious issue in the years to come. The application of organic matter, the conservation of natural resources on the farm, windbreaks, and also then deeper polybags to strengthen the growth of seedlings in the field, to make them stronger before you transfer them to to the production field. Also here, you see the adaptation rates in Brazil. And very nice to see actually that all the farms and the farmers with whom we have been working, they were convinced after 2 years of implementing with the cover crop, with introducing cover crops in their system. Also the protection of water in springs and riparian areas gained a lot of ground. And yet windbreaks was a very attractive element for the Brazilian producers to take on board. I also am able to share some information about the return on investment from a farmer perspective. So the question, does adaptation pay? We would like to answer here in the case of the Brazilian farmer. We here nicely have a picture of an area where we operate. It's Machados, close to Perdões. And the farm was, to the right, the adaptation options were starting to get introduced by 2011. And you see to the left, business as usual, unshaded soil, and the plants also not shaded. Well, to the right, shade is just starting to grow, but soil cover has been introduced to the farm. This farmer also planted trees around his farm to introduce windbreaks in the years to come. And the question then, does adaptation pay? We try to answer by clustering the farmers in 3 different categories. We have non-adopters, or adopters that are just starting. We have adoption, where farmers usually apply soil cover as the first very important element to upgrade the production system. And the second is then, next to soil cover, also introduce windbreaks in their farm. We can see that in all these places where adaptation is gaining ground, farmers are benefiting from higher yields. It's an observation. Please don't ask me for a statistic evidence at this point in time. It's an observation that we start, and definitely something which I would like to share with you, that we are at an early stage of making these observations. More validation is required. We need to continue assessing and measuring to find out better. Here, what we can see is also the drought effect in Brazil. It was data taken from 2013 and 2014, and you can see that obviously in the farms that introduced adaptation options as recommended by the farmers, as identified by the farmers themselves, they were experiencing better productivity levels. So we had the non-adopters around 20 bags per hectare, and the strong adopters around 35 bags per hectare, producing in the same region under the same climatic conditions. The good news is that the adopters definitely benefit then also in terms of an economic return from much higher gross margins. But we also have to face it that, at least in Brazil, the adaptation of farms to strengthen their resilience comes at a cost. Here we talk about changing labor regimes on the farm, but also conducting proper investments. In a place like Brazil, it can be done because systems are in place. We have a very, very well-developed credit system called PRONAF that small-scale farmers can access. Hurdles sometimes are strong for them to exit it properly, but at least the system is there and can be utilized. In other places, not necessarily, we have the same kind of support services already in place. So again, a call for us to also look into our operations to strengthen the environment in which farmers operate. Not necessarily in all places the adaptation options need to add to costs. They can also reduce costs or can become cost neutral. Reduction of costs if we change fertilizer schemes, for instance, and if we also regulate the pH level, raise the efficiency of operations. In Brazil also we saw that the larger seedlings dramatically reduced the failure rate when plants have been transferred to the field. It does not only pay for the farmer, it also pays for us all in the coffee sector. We all can expect, if these experiences gain ground, that productivity is less being affected, that we also will probably have more stability in price levels, and that definitely also the income for the producing countries, for the producing communities, but also for the countries will change, so that hopefully also supply services can be improved and upgraded. But nevertheless, let's be clear that all this requires investment. All this requires us to take action, it requires farmers to take action, so we need to be prepared to undergo these investments. And please, let's do all and everything that we do them wisely and in a very efficient manner. We are here to share, and Giuseppe was mentioning that already before, we have documented all our experiences and make them available through this online platform, which we call the CNC Toolbox to the coffee sector. We also have a source book, really a manual that describes all the steps that our teams have been conducting in the field in very detail. How we entertain with farmers, how we engage with farmers, and how we use our methodologies in a very participatory manner. We also have case studies that document certain experiences as we have already identified them in a way that, in particular, extension workers can use them. All that information not necessarily is the one that the farmer is going to use one by one. It's more information for us as service providers to the producers, as people and parties engaged in supporting developing countries and developing regions in their way to upgrade the resilience on their production systems that shall utilize this information. So we invite everybody who is active next to farmers to make use of the experiences and to comment back how actually these experiences are working in the field and help us over time to upgrade the knowledge base for us all in the coffee sector. We have the ambition, and Giuseppe Lavazza also mentioned that, to suggest coffee and climate as probably a convincing strategy for us in the sector to align and to better take action towards strengthening the resilience of coffee producing systems. The farmer response you have seen, but also the response from many actors in places where we operate is very encouraging and very positive. We have seen local structures and local farmer organizations that knocked doors and asked for support in introducing the methodology and the approaches in their own extension work. So we have identified a training of trainers curriculum and a training of trainers workshop methodology to also share the experiences with others. We are here to share, and I can only invite other partners from the industry who are committed to also use the approach in their field operation. We have put the number of 70,000 farmers as the objective for phase number 2 on the screens, because we think that the partners that already are cooperating and form part of the Coffee and Climate Initiative with their own activities in the field can quite easily reach that figure. So in essence, I believe that we are still quite conservative with the number of farmers we might be able to benefit. We have a number of places already identified where we want to start replicating coffee and climate, but we will also definitely work on the scaling of the activities, as mentioned, with the response of local partners in the places where we currently operate. Coffee and climate is still a sector initiative. It's a small initiative, but we definitely need to take into consideration the global agenda and the global scenery when we talk about further developing the approaches in our sector. We have the farmer. So far, this was the work that you have seen. It's addressing the farm level. But the farmer, he lives in a community. We can definitely also find ways to activate the communities and the local structures around the farms to form part of developing coping strategies. We also have the farmers and the communities living in landscapes. So there's a clear need for us to connect outside the farming environment with other actors that are operating in the same landscape as the producers do. To have a clear concept and a clear plan, as I think also came quite clear from the presentation of the Vice Minister of Costa Rica, we need a plan. We need a plan, and we need a commitment to that plan at a local and landscape level. But the plan definitely needs to cater for a countrywide approach. Here we have the farmers and the communities and the production landscapes identified in Tanzania. But definitely Tanzania is not the end of it. For us, the limit is the world, and this is where definitely our experiences need to hook on. So very fast we are, and Roberto was mentioned it in the beginning, we are at the level of the United Nations framework for a Convention on Climate Change. This is the process which we need to take into consideration when also talking about raising the scale of our experiences. The NAMA forms part of that setup, of that scheme. It's an instrument that the producing countries, or let's say the countries, all the countries basically, but in our case the producing countries, can apply to upgrade operations and strengthen the operations of the producers in the coffee sector. I would like to draw your attention on that chart to the left-hand side. There it says 2015, and there's a red bar next to it, indicating that there's a very important event taking place in Paris in December this year. All countries around the globe that do form part of this framework, and it's almost universally that we have the countries participating, they are challenged to present to that conference their national indicated programs for coping with climate change. So adaptation as well as mitigation will form part of that setup. It's also important to take into consideration that not only technical issues will be discussed at this conference, but also financial issues. The world is mobilizing at least $100 billion for supporting action in developing countries to address climate change. And public-private partnerships and concrete practical action are identified as very important elements to take all these ideas and plans into action. Political dialogue, joint learning, and definitely action in the field next to the producers will play a role. We have definitely something to offer. I think it came clear this morning from the presentations that we had, from the presentation in Vision 2020, from the NAMA presentation, a very practical, hands-on approach already in place in Costa Rica, from the pilot projects that we have inside Coffee and Climate. I can name many more activities. The work of Ili in Ili Café in Ethiopia and Brazil, the work of World Coffee Research, the work of the Brazilian Coffee Research, the work of the Federación de Cafeteros in Colombia. We have a lot of information and experiences in our sector. What we still lack is coherence in the way that we are addressing these challenges. But by doing it, and here we would like definitely to invite you to join us in Coffee and Climate, we would like to emphasize on this opportunity. And we are currently within Coffee and Climate working on a statement. On a statement we would like to share with the parties that come together at the UNFCCC conferences. We have a very, very important sector that we represent. It's 70 countries that produce coffee. 90% of those countries are developing countries. We have 100 million of people involved in the production and the value chain of coffee. 70% of the producers are small-scale farmers with their families, with their networks. So it's really a very strong sector that we do represent, and definitely if we don't take action, many, many millions of people will suffer from the challenges associated with climate change and might have their livelihood situations endangered. So within coffee and climate, companies have started to respond to risks and threats. We are striving for a consolidation of the experiences and to upscale successful approaches. We want more cooperation in a very structured way. We have pioneers activities, as I was mentioning already, and we wish to join with all this experience, this global effort to effectively address climate change and strengthen the farmer resilience. Definitely it's a win-win situation because we can contribute to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions while at the same time strengthening the production base for our sector. We believe that our sector can perform a leadership role. We are not aware of any other agricultural sector having the potential of unifying behind a common understanding and becoming interest. So we, in this statement, which we see as a living document, as a starting point to get into dialogue and to show our commitment and our interests and our willingness to go further in hands-on action and mutual learning. We see it as a starting point, and we would like to articulate actually that in a way that we can raise the interest for our sector, that we can achieve better support for the farmers, that we can align our efforts in raising efficiency, and we can advance in joint planning. We have something to offer to governments, as mentioned. Many of the parties and the companies that are present today, and many more that have not found their way to Milano, they are active in the field, and they definitely can make a big effort in their operations, and yet benefit from leveraging with the resources of the United Nations framework. The outcome is not yet clear. Don't get me wrong. It's not yet clear if we go to Paris and make our case that everybody will jump on it. But believe me, I think we have very interesting things to offer, and we definitely have nothing to lose. So please feel invited to join in. Look at the statement at some point. Maybe you find interest in joining that opportunity. And please also feel invited to look deeper into coffee and climate and help us by joining to take this initiative further. Thank you very much.